Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Pattern Design Circle podcast. I am super excited to be here in your ear again, and I have a special guest with me this week. I have Carolyn from CouleeCraft, and I'm really excited about this conversation because although I don't really know Carolyn very well, from what she shared with me, she sounds to be very multi-passionate, and I think a lot of us creative business owners relate to that. So I'm really excited to hear about your path to where you've gotten now, and then how you're juggling all the things that you're juggling in life and business and all of the things.
Yes.
So you're a designer, you are a hobby farmer, you
Mhm.
are a community builder. What else would you share about yourself?
Well, I live out in the middle of nowhere with my two kids and my husband, and we just have a blast out on our hobby farm out here. And I don't know, just really like I think you're right. I think it's very typical of creative folks to have the kind of like generalist, multi-passionate vibes going on. I mean, I don't know very many crafters who just have one work in progress at a time. I know they exist. I just don't know any of them. Uh, if you, Jessica, are one of those people, then I will add that to my list of
I
monogamous
have
crafters.
I have plenty of like whips, but when I get into a project, like I hyper focus and I do work on like I don't have like actively juggling things. I do a lot of hyper focusing, but I'm interested in a bajillion things. So like
Yes.
I do one thing for a while and then I'm super excited about another thing.
Yes. Just before we were recording, I was texting one of my good friends. I'm like, are we gonna do punch needle now? Like, is that what like I have never in my life. So obviously, and then that person asked me, like, have you done it before? And I sent the how hard can it be gif. That's really the vibe. But yeah, like you said, I've done a ton of different things. Kind of like reflecting on my journey. I've been designing crochet patterns specifically since I was 8. So that's more than 5 years. Uh, that's over 20 years now of designing crochet patterns, and knitting patterns. I've been designing since 2013-ish, so in my 20s. And that is just like born out of a desire to never leave well enough alone. Like I love like when I learned to read crochet patterns, my long-suffering grandma finally taught me after my endless pestering. Um, she doesn't know how to read patterns. So she made me memorize the abbreviations chart and then read what the stitch names were to her because she had no desire to learn to read the patterns, but she knew what all the stitches were. And she had the patterns she liked to do memorized. So I read her the pattern, like translated it for her, and she showed me how to do the stitches, was how I learned. And
That's hilarious.
it's really like looking back, I'm like, that's actually pretty funny. I was like, oh yeah, that's how everyone learns. Their grandma makes them memorize an abbreviations chart. Um, and I've taught a lot of crocheters and knitters. I co-owned a yarn shop for about a year, like a local yarn shop with a friend, and that was like a very educational experience in just my crafting life. We had that friend that I co-owned it with. We had had a podcast for like 2 years at that point, and then I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Uh, she in particular was, the more business side of it. I did a lot of the vendor relations, ended up teaching classes, but that was 2017, late 2016 through 2017. And that was such an educational experience for me. I was shocked to learn how other people engage with the craft. Just not shocked in like a bad way, just like really intrigued because it was very different somewhat to the way I engage with craft. Like our opening day, every single person who came through our doors like, "Where's your class list?" And we were like, we weren't planning to do that for like 6 months, until after opening. So we, threw together a class list. I'm like, I can teach. I taught so many beginning to knit, beginning to crochet classes, and that informed my patience a lot. I feel like it probably made me a better parent. um, and it really helped me be able to like communicate pieces of the craft to people who were struggling to comprehend it, and people who would come in and say like, oh, I could never, and then watch them walk out with, 5 swatches and the knowledge. Like, that's a creative high for me.
Yes, yes. Do you have a favorite like project or niche from the past
Ooh.
that you're not doing right now?
Ooh, that's such a good one. So in like the local yarn store world, especially the era that we were operating that shop, shawls were like a really big thing. I know that they kind of still are, but like they were like, the Stephen West Mystery Cal every year and stuff like that. That was like a really big deal. Um, and I love a shawl. I don't wear them like at all anymore since I don't own a really yarn shop. Because I had so many. Like I go through my knitwear and looking at stuff like I have the Find Your Fade. I mean, this is like really dating me of like what was hot and popular. That's like so many skeins of sack yarn. And then there was another one that was similar that was just, we called them schlankets. They're like a shawl blanket situation. Um, but like I would wear those when I was working in the shop, like kimono wrapped and like, like doing all these artistic things. And I'm like, that's really not practical to wear around the farm. Um, or to create as a project anymore, just because I don't wear those the way I used to. So that's probably like the weird niche one from the past. My other ones that are like from the past, I still make a ton of stuffed animals and weird purses. Those have been going strong for forever.
Yes. So did having a yarn shop and teaching all of those classes inform how you design patterns now or how you write patterns now?
Yes, yes, for sure. As a designer, I I kind of like try to toe the line of like informative enough that somebody can interpret and make the thing, right? But also not so informative that it's, and I've used patterns like this and I know for some people it's really useful, but a photo of like every move of the needle, like you got like a stop motion flip book, those are fine and those are very, very important for a lot of people. I, for my own brain, I'm like, I can't do that. So kind of balancing the in between area of like, okay, my pattern is never going to be 100% accessible for everyone. And kind of coming to terms with that, right? Because I want to be able to label the pattern like literally anyone could do it. And like, that's not real. But those classes have helped me understand of like, okay, what does a beginner actually know? What does someone who is brand new to the craft actually know? And what does somebody who's more advanced know? And what should be labeled as like adventurous beginner, how to use encouraging language to make people feel like, you can do it. Like almost all my patterns have suggestions for YouTube videos in them and reminders of like, hey, if you can't figure it out, just make it another way and here's some other options.
I love that. That is so cool. Do you still teach classes?
Not classes per se. So I worked in that business partnership relationship for about a year, and then we ended up moving. So where I'm at now, and we moved in the middle of the pandemic, I haven't taught classes because that was something I thought I would maybe continue.
Hmm.
I've taught people informally. Like I have friends that I've taught, teach over Zoom, pals, and stuff like that. But it's something that like more recently I've been kind of missing. I'm like, I kind of like describing a slip knot to somebody for the thousandth time.
Yes, that is something where I love knitting and designing. I don't love teaching the same thing over and over again. I'm like, I'm happy to record a YouTube tutorial and put it up for you and link it to you in the past.
Hmm.
I'm happy to refer you to another teacher. I don't mind like, teaching a friend or whatever,
Yeah.
just randomly. But I don't have the desire to teach.
Mhm.
Like I if I can record it and have it available and you have your information, go for it. But I'm that's something I'm not passionate about.
It's, I mean, it's almost like maybe it's a little bit of like my ego of like the being, oh, this was very difficult to do, like to get somebody to learn how to take a hook or two sticks and string and make an item. Like that's not simple. So maybe it's just a little bit of me being like, yes,
Well, and we
like,
need we
teach
need people who actually like to teach. Like
me. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
anybody were like me, that we'd have a whole lot of folks who like there are a lot of people who really do struggle learning from tutorials and stuff and
Yep.
being in person and having somebody next to them to say, hey, no, this is how we do it, or to answer their questions or to, you know, reassure them that they're on the right path. It's a very valuable position. Yes. So what do you have something now that you're working on, like big picture, like all the facets
Mhm.
of your business, that lights you up the most, or do they all kind of have their like kind of different purposes that they serve for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I am really excited in general just about I spent last year really focused on like my job and which is really quite a fun job. I work in online community management. So I get to talk to artists all day, every day, like in artist communities, and like I get paid to do that. That's like past Carolyn is like, is this real? But I love that work and that's been really fun. And now I'm kind of coming back to the space where that's all on track. I'm learning a lot still in that space, but I'm having more and more mental capacity to do more designing and to dig into that side of it. One of the big things that I'm like really, really excited about is I design and publish my own patterns. But I've been considering this year of like, okay, what are other outlets? Where else can my stuff be distributed? Or designing things within kind of like confines for other distributions. So I've been looking for like calls for patterns, learning from my friends who are published in other areas as well of like, what does that look like? What is that something I want to partake and participate in? So that's something that's like super exciting of like seeing how I can be part of publications or if it even seems fun. Um, that's super exciting. And other things, we're now, I mean, it's raining today, but we're now entering where I live the season of like good weather for outdoor photo shoots. And my sister is a very talented photographer. And I also have a nice camera that the camera is a good photographer. I don't know what I'm doing, but we have so much fun, her and I, doing very irreverent shoots for my patterns. And all winter, all the pieces that I've designed and published, I've done like okay-ish indoor shoots, but now we're hitting the era of like we have Pinterest story like mood boards that were set up. So I love to be the creative director for our shoots. So we've got a few fun ones coming up, and I'm like, they don't really enhance the patterns necessarily. I call them the glamour shots for the project. They're not like technical, the photos for that. Those are always done on my phone and then edited that way. But they're they're fun. And I'm just like really excited about doing more of those. Those really bring me a lot of joy.
Yes, that is, I think, one of the like pros and cons of being multi-passionate is like, all right, we have this business where we have so many different like creative ways that we kind of need to show up in photography and web design and all of the different things. And so it's like, to me, if I like focus hyper focus into those things, I really love them, but then the problem is there's so many of them that
Yeah.
like it's I personally feel like it's hard to get really good at every single part
Hmm.
of all of the creative aspects of a business, but it's cool that they're all there.
Yeah, totally. And like social marketing is my background. So that's like what
Mhm.
I've been doing since 2015 professionally, air quotes, because I mean, any job is made up. You make up, say your job's whatever you want. But that, like, I get really efficient at doing social media. And I actually took like a 6 month break from Instagram and TikTok, actually, probably like 8 months, for my business, for my own business, and for my creative business. And it was so refreshing to come back and unfollow like 1,000 accounts. I mean, but like to really think about it, like I logged back into CouleeCraft's Instagram like a couple weeks ago for the first time in months. And I was like, okay, how do I actually want to interact with this? Because I can go work mode on this and schedule posts in advance and like be really strategic and plan things out and have a marketing strategy. But that's my day job. So for this, I'm like, okay, what do I actually crave? Like, I don't need, like, I have other things that I work on that fulfill that side of my brain. I don't need this to also be that. I want to spend more time designing and just talking with people who are excited about my patterns. So I have a little tiny baby Discord server, which is really fun. And YouTube is definitely where like my heart is for creating content and getting to actually engage with people who are excited about what I'm doing.
Yes. Okay, so before we get into the Discord and the YouTube,
Yeah.
so many creatives hate social marketing.
Yes. Oh,
What
yeah. I know.
what do you have any like kind of advice that you find yourself giving over and over again, or like words of encouragement? Or what do you have to say to designers who are just like, I hate this, I hate that
Hmm.
marketing is part of my job, like what do you say to them?
So when I'm talking with anyone about how much they hate social media, which is the bulk of my conversations every day, uh, I'm like, yo, me too, because it's a really toxic tool if you're using it wrong. Like anything, right? Like anything can be really, really negative. And we've seen just the bleakest timeline of how bad social media can be for people. And whenever I talk to people, I'm like, okay, if you are that miserable, just walk out for months. Like, you don't have to tell anyone you're leaving. You don't have to do anything because your mental health is so much more important than showing up on any platform. And when I did that, I took a lot of time to really think about, okay, what do I want to happen? What's the best possible outcome of being on a social platform for me, for my own brand, right? Is it sales? Is it newsletter signups? Is it YouTube subs? Is it Patreon subscription? Like, what is the best possible thing to come out of it? And like journaled about it for literal months. wrote lists of like, okay, these would be really great outcomes, pared those lists down of like, okay, this is getting to the root of it. Like, is that actually an outcome I want? Like, really thinking about it. Like, what would that, do I actually want that? And like being really realistic with myself. And then from there, being like, okay, these are the outcomes I want. This is the type of content I genuinely enjoy making. And these are the platforms that content does well on. And does well is completely subjective. And I mean, even in coming back to Instagram after being away from it for so long, I really don't enjoy creating content on the platform. I love making short form videos, but I don't enjoy interacting with them on Instagram. I like telling a story about a piece in a longer video, and I don't feel that the short videos do justice. I love making them because it's fun, it's like artistic, goofy. But the thing that I did love about Instagram and still do is making new friends. So I really don't post that much content anymore. But I go and I comment on other people's stuff and I DM people and I message people and I maybe one post every 2 weeks since I've been back or one post a week. But I'm really not there for that. I'm there to like see what other people are doing in the space, be inspired and collaborate and make friends. And using it that way, like, shocker, it's way more fun because the outcome I want is like to have creative peers that are enthusiastic about my work.
Mhm.
So using it to get that
Yeah.
benefit.
So much of, I feel like almost everything that I share for like creative businesses, like on this podcast, is it always comes down to really knowing what's actually important to you, what's valuable to
Yes,
you. There are so many things out there of you should do this or you'll be successful if you do that, or so many things out there. But it's most of us, or I'd probably argue all of us designers, most creative businesses, perhaps all, we're here because we love it. Like
yeah,
we don't want to hate what we're doing. And so I don't think we should force ourselves into pegs just because we think that's what's going to be successful. But so I really love how you
absolutely.
took that time to be like, all right, what do I really want? What are the outcomes I really want? Are those the outcomes that I actually want or that I just think I should want? Or
Hmm.
do you think that it's possible to have healthy, sustainable relationships with social media?
I think I'm still wrestling with that every day.
Mhm.
Um, yes and no. I think we live in a time where it's funny, I was just having this conversation with my husband last night about learning knitting and crochet skills. I was debating, I was like, oh, would it be cool to try and get my master knitter or master crochet certification from the guilds? And I'm like, we had this whole discussion about like, we actually live in a time where I'm like, okay, I don't. He's like, well, what do you actually want for that? I'm like, the title doesn't really mean anything. I'm like, I care about the preservation of the craft and I want to learn more of the history. I mean, like, I have so many history books about knitting and textile arts, but like, okay, well, if that's important, we live in a time where you can learn from anyone on the planet, pretty much. YouTube's amazing. Like, you can go and find someone on Instagram that is a person who is like a member of whatever culture you want to learn the craft of, and you can connect with them and learn from them and obviously pay them for their expertise. But like, never before in history have we had that. And I think that's a really beautiful thing for our society that if we engage with the internet and social media specifically in a healthy way, thinking about those positive things of skill sharing, knowledge sharing, learning from each other, seeing people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints, people you completely disagree with, and being able to see how and why they live their life, it's going to make us a better society if we can get over ourselves and start learning from each other a little better.
Yes, yes, it is. We're definitely in a very interesting phase of evolution or whatever you want to call it, where like certifications and stuff in general just aren't as important because you can go
No.
learn stuff from anywhere. You can learn how to do anything on your own. I
Yes.
my well, it would have been like around the time I moved here to North Carolina, so almost 4 years ago. And no, almost 5 years ago.
Time's fake.
Anyway, there I discovered, the guild and the master knitting and all of that, and um had heard a conversation between some designers of like how it's so important to do that as a designer and how it builds your credibility and like, like
Mm,
basically you can showcase that you're actually really good at what you do. And I'm glad that I didn't try to force myself into that because I wasn't really interested in it. But like I'm like now, like I don't think my audience would
no one would care. Yeah.
do diddly squats about
Yeah.
it. Um, and to spend all of that time and resources, money, all of the things to achieve that. And so there are so many things that maybe are more subtle in
Hmm.
building a business that are like that as well, where it's just like get caught up in feeling like we have to do this
Yep.
thing in order to be perceived a certain way or in order to have a certain level of success or all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big truth right there. I love asking people about, whether they're like, oh, I want to build an online community for my brand, or I want to, I need to be better at social media. I'm like, okay, why? Like, why do you want to show up on the internet in that way? What do you want to happen? Well, I want to make more money. Okay, what if you put 700 hours into it and you make one more dollar? I personally don't want to work that many hours.
Yes, yes. Okay, I promise we're still gonna get to YouTube and Discord, but
Awesome.
uh, before that, I do also have a question though. As a multi-passionate, uh,
Hmm.
and thinking about, all of the shoulds, the have tos, all of the things that people like to say we need to be doing, have you felt pressure to niche in specific ways? Have you felt, how has that been for you? Like, have you felt like you can just be a multi-passionate person, or have you felt like do you want to niche? Do you like to niche? What does that experience look like for you?
That's really interesting. I have only a tiny bit have I ever struggled with like oh, like that thought of like I do a lot of things. Um, and it's usually when I'm looking at my Ravelry designer page where I see like the breadth of different types of patterns I've put out. There are certain like sorts of patterns that I create. I do a lot of crochet work for design patterns, and they're usually irreverent, weird purses, bags, or stuffed animals. Um, those kind of all have the same, like, I would say, flavor. I feel like if you lined those up, you'd be like, that's probably from the same designer. But then if you put my knitting designs with it, because a lot of my actual knitting patterns, those came from when I was working at the yarn shop. So they're designed like with a middle-aged white woman in the Midwest in mind, which like that was our customer base. It's different, right? Like they look different, they're for different people, and when they're together, like I wouldn't necessarily say that they look similar, but I feel very strongly that my portfolio of work represents the breadth of my talents, which that's more important to me, right? I'd rather blow people's mind with like, oh yeah, I also sew and I spin my own yarn, and I do a ton of other things in addition to designing super weird purses shaped like ramen bowls and stuff like that. Like I want to be able to create things that make me feel happy and proud of my skills. And if I can make a pattern for that that makes somebody else feel excited and proud of their own skills, like that's a win. But I don't, I guess to answer the question in a very long way, I don't feel pressured to niche down from external pressures. Only occasionally I'll be like, okay, What are you doing? Where's this cohesion? There's no cohesion. And that's only from the sensor kind of thing in my brain being like the voice of false reason, right? The rude negative self-talk.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you feel like if you were to d just describe your designs to somebody who's never met you before, or if you want to describe your inspiration of like why do you design? What does that look like?
Most of my most recent designs are inspired by either things that I find aesthetically pleasing, things that bring me joy, or things that kind of spark a sense of nostalgia. So I've designed socks that still need to be finished and put out. The socks are done, but the pattern needs to be finished. I designed a pair of socks and a hat that are colorwork knitting that are inspired by the gooseberry pyrex pattern because that was the pattern my grandma had and still has. And that was something that I love that bold graphic vintage almost folk art look of stuff. I'm super inspired by just walking through the antique mall. This is another many multi-passionate thing. I have a booth at an antique mall. Um, like, I love walking through that antique mall and like looking at the other vendors and color and shape and just like thinking about how we adorn items that we use. I that inspires me to no end. Like love that bold colored dishware. I have so many pictures on my phone of like patterned dishware from the 60s. That stuff inspires me, but like, yeah, I think the the tagline I use is the design is designs for the serotonin of it all. Like, which that's what I go for, right? If I'm designing something or thinking about designing something, I want people to smile when they see it, no matter what. Whether it's like, wow, that's so gorgeous and stunning and refined and elegant. Most of my pieces are not that. Um, or if they're like, that's hilarious, I love it, that's unique. I want people to smile. So that's the hope. That's the
Yes,
drive.
I love that. I had written down the quote and was hoping I could integrate it somehow while we were talking. From when you submitted the information for the podcast episode, you said that you like to design the most smile-inducing weird stuff you can.
Yep. Yep. That's an accurate sum up. I mean, I've knit tiny sturgeon, which are fish, like little teeny tiny ornaments for my dad because he loves sturgeon. I knit them tiny Christmas hats, like make stuff for my kids that makes them smile and laugh. Like that's why like we don't need to make items anymore. I mean, everybody should learn how to, but that's a separate soapbox. But items are manufactured for us at this point of our society to do it and to spend the time and energy and wrist muscles on it. Like it better be good. It better be fun. You better love what you're doing.
Yes, yes. And I think just from what I've seen of your work and our conversation here, I feel like you do what you do really well, or one thing that you do really well is really doing what you love. Like just having fun and like even the kind of the sort of niche that you are in and what you actually design, it's not like you've allowed yourself to be put into this box of, well, designers need to have these kinds of things in their portfolio, or is there even anyone who's going to enjoy these weird things? Everybody's knitting or crocheting XYZ, but I think you are so good at just like doing things that you love, that you're passionate about, and put a smile on your face. And then I firmly believe that when we do what we're passionate about and we're excited about it, it makes everybody else so much more excited about it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not like, as much as everybody wants to feel like we're unique individuals, like if it makes me happy, there's going to be at least one other person out there that's going to think it's fun and neat. Like, I don't think I have a pattern yet that hasn't sold at least one copy. So, like, that, I mean, that's a gauge of success.
Yes, yes. Do you have a favorite pattern that you've designed?
it's always like whatever one I'm looking at. I feel like because I'll like look at one, I'll be like, oh, I'm so proud of that one. Um, my most recent pattern to release is I should have had it sitting in here. That would be smart, but I think my daughter stole it and adopted it. So she has a snail character that she made up, and she originally made it out of Legos, and its name is Innie. I don't know. And we've drawn Annie, she and I, like we've made many iterations of Annie. And I finally crocheted Annie, but it's a snail backpack. So
Oh.
it's in the colors that she used for like, and like this isn't in the pattern. I was just like, oh yeah, snail backpack, cottage core. Like that's my lifestyle. But that one's really special to me because like the way she screamed when it was done, it was like I was like, this is it. This is a high point. Like because she was like, it's Amy. She's just freaking out. I'm like, it is. It is. And she creative directed our little mini photo shoot for that one. And she's going to creative direct a larger one that my sister's gonna come over and do. So that's probably like personal fave right now, just because of that like backstory that no one else really wouldn't necessarily care about, right? Like no one's gonna be like, okay, it's your daughter's snail original character.
But I think it's also such a fun story that people will love. It might, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to buy the pattern, but
Yeah.
love and connect to it. It's just so fun.
Yeah.
It just brings a smile. So,
Exactly. Totally.
um, oh, I thought I was going to ask something else, and I don't remember what it was. Anyway, um, yeah, I don't know. I I guess for my own designs, I relate a lot to like looking at my portfolio and being like, oh, there's definitely some stuff that doesn't feel like it quite fits. Yeah, but it's interesting. Like I've done kind of a variety of things because I wasn't much of a knitter before I was a designer. Like I hadn't been knitting forever before I started designing. So I really was kind of like a lot of my designing career has been, what do I even enjoy knitting?
Mhm.
What's my knit aesthetic and all of that. But it is interesting how like I'm like, all right, I'm not really like a lacy kind of person, but the designs that I'm most proud of are the ones that are because it was like, just like how much work
Yes.
went into it. And so yeah, totally relate on, kind of the what else
Mhm.
don't see sometimes is the
I mean, from a designer standpoint, the math that goes into lace to make it be anything besides like a rectangle, like even that, like lace is crazy. Like it's still one of my favorite things to knit just because it scratches that math brain, but I don't design with it.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's actually talk about community building and
Let's do it.
YouTube and Discord and all of the things. So how does that integrate in your whole business, or what is the kind of like the full business picture look like in terms of, all right, we have designing, we have Discord, we have YouTube.
Mhm.
What are those pieces?
So because I have a day job, I'm a freelancer and I work a bunch of different contracts, different times. My main contract, this plays into how my business is built out. My main contract is I'm the community manager at Patreon. So I manage the online creators community, which is the most fun. Um, like I get to talk to artists all day. Like how horrible is that? With with that, I've learned a ton in the past year about Discord and how to set up servers. So as I was learning to do that, I started my own Discord server, just like a little baby one. And I joined some other ones about crafts, just because I was like, I need to, for work, be a better user of this platform that I actually genuinely hate. Um, it's it's not the most user friendly, I would say. Um, it has its place and there are a lot of pros to using it, but my main reason for starting one was because I wanted to go through as a creator the onboarding process on Patreon to set up a Discord server because you can link your Discord server to your Patreon account. So when people pay, they can get access to your server or for free, whatever, right? There's different ways to set it up. So I built that out. I built out my Patreon page. CouleeCraft has existed, like I said, for forever. So I was like, that's a real business. I'll use that to set it up. So I did. And then from that, I was like, okay, I know what creators are going through when they're setting it up now. I also want to start thinking about this as an actual creator business because it's going to make me better at my job. As a community manager, I'm going to be able to understand more what people are going through and experiencing. And now, to be fair, I have a little bit of an edge on some of our creators because I have a social marketing background. So, with that, my kind of like funnel or process or whatever is, I design things that seem fun whenever. I don't have like a schedule. I have a really beautiful Notion database that I built out. Shout out Notion for being amazing. And I have in there, I mean, I have my big notebook of patterns I've designed, like written. I have a big database of like what patterns have been written, what have been typed up, what have been tested. I have all that in my database. As a pattern gets done, either being testing or I decide I've done it enough that I'm not going to send it to testers, I finish it and I publish it. It goes through GoSadie, which is a new app. Love GoSadie, which is how we met. And I publish it there, which puts it on Ravelry and Etsy. And then I also publish it as a paid item, like a digital item in my Patreon store that people, even if they're not subscribers to my Patreon, they can purchase it. So, right, it's another avenue for selling digital items. So, those are the three sales platforms. And while I'm designing, I talk about it on YouTube. Now, this year, I have not done a ton of YouTube videos. I had been doing weekly vlogs, which were great fun. I love them, where I would talk about what I'm working on, show off the projects. I would share like clips of other things if I didn't have the items with me. Would I use CapCut to edit, put them up as overlays, super easy. They're easy to edit, fun. I love making videos, so I really enjoyed that. Upload it on YouTube. It would go as a free post on Patreon too, and I basically ignored Instagram all of last year. And that was it. That was like every week, talk about what I'm working on. Sometimes special projects would get their own video highlight, like long form video. All the videos would go up onto Patreon as free posts, talk about Patreon and all of them. I don't have any paid subscribers on Patreon. I mostly do free content. And then always with the invite of people, you can join my Discord. And I had like a couple of people I knew in my Discord. And then I had two people find it was the ramen bag that I made and the snail backpack when I was sharing those designs. They found me on YouTube because of those and they're freaking out. They're like, I would love to test this for you. And so I was like, sure, email me. Like they won't. And they did. And they're amazing. Like shout out to my testers. And so they joined the Discord. I have a testers only channel for them. And like they tested my patterns and they're like, so good. Like I've had pattern testers many, many times before, especially when we were at the yarn shop and I was designing. We'd have, customers test and stuff like that for store credit. And never in my life have I had testers as focused, detail oriented, and just they've made me such a better designer. Which, like, it's like a little bit of a bummer because in the past, like, I don't make garments, so I'm not as concerned about gauge. So I would publish a pattern maybe without testing it super, like having other people test it. I'd make it a couple times and be like, it's good. But now I'm like, after they've found so many different ways to make my patterns so much better, I'm like, I really should have them look at all. I need to be better about it.
Yes, yes. That's so fun. So what are you doing with YouTube now? You said you're You kind of,
So I want to go back to weekly vlogs. I have at the beginning of the year, I made a video talking about how I am going to spend this whole year working from my existing stash, which I have been doing. I've been a pretty good girl on that. Like not purchasing a ton of yarn. I'm not really like I have a big stash, but I'm not like a yarn hoarder. We live in a very small house now too, which is a really big incentive to not have a big stash. Um, so I made a whole video about it, about how I'm going to spend the whole year working from my stash. It's low stakes, but I'd love to have people join and like challenge themselves to like find joy in what they already have, right? We don't need to be over consuming craft supplies. And every couple of weeks I get a couple of joins to the Discord server from that video, and I it always makes me smile and laugh. Like, I mean, that's the desired outcome, but I'm always like, oh my God, it worked. So it's the end of quarter one, so we're in quarter two now. I'm due to update YouTube, which I'm planning to do later this week, of how quarter one went, what my goal was, because I shared that in my intro video, what I ended up achieving, and how I'm shifting for quarter two, because I'm definitely shifting it. Because, right, like, again, adjusting what you're doing based on what the outcome is. Like, my outcome is to have fun with my stash. And if I'm just counting ounces or whatever, I'm probably not having fun. So, like, I'm excited to share that on YouTube and go back to more weekly updates. And I'm inching closer to finishing the project from the video that gets consistently the most views. Still not done from like a year ago. So that's my crochet denim jacket, which is so freaking cool. And it's so close to being done. So once that's done, it's going to get a rehash big video all about the whole process and how people can do that on their own, thrift a jacket and make cool crochet panels for it.
yes, that is so cool. Um, oh shoot. I had a question.
I keep doing this to you.
Um, oh goodness. We were talking about. Oh. So when I feel like this is a question that is going to be in a lot of listeners' ears right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you pivot, when you make changes, when you decided to let go of Instagram for a while, whatever it's looked like in the different capacities, how has that impacted the financial side of your craft business?
It changes, right? So when I left Instagram, I didn't notice a change in my pattern sales. Most of my sales, unfortunately, come from Etsy just because it is such a good search-based platform. I occasionally get Ravelry sales, but even though my patterns are cheaper there, I'm not seeing as many Ravelry sales. Bigger pivot would be when I left working at the yarn shop. I did not see nearly as many Ravelry sales when samples were shifted from some of my floor samples. Not like I left and all the samples were pulled down. It was over time.
Yeah.
But I noticed it like a noticeable downtick because I had stuff I had designed specifically for the shop that were on floor samples. It'd be like every week, a couple sales. And I could tell that they were coming from the shop because it was the LYS like
Yeah.
partnership through Ravelry. That was a big difference, right? I wasn't like actively making samples to go up in yarn shops. We had some other ones where we partnered with some other regional ones where I had a couple samples there. Once those weren't on the floor anymore, it was a very obvious change. Um, but as far as like leaving Instagram, like that didn't didn't impact it. Being more active on YouTube was a positive impact in my discovery, at least. I feel like my Etsy shop in particular got more traffic and more faves not more purchases. My purchases on Etsy have kind of just been like, honestly, just plateaued. Views will change, but that doesn't impact sales. So I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out the finances behind that, but I don't know.
Yes, thank you.
Suggestions welcome.
Thank you for sharing that because I think it there can be a lot of fear in changing something if it's even like partially working and being like,
Mhm.
if I let go of this, if I like what is going to happen? Because sometimes it is difficult to know where the traffic actually is coming from, especially on Ravelry.
Yeah.
Their tracking isn't always super helpful. Um, uh, but just to give I guess all of us permission to
Oh
let go
yeah.
and be willing to try something different, see what happens, and even maybe just doing something that you love more.
Mhm.
That is a success in and of itself. But
Yes.
then over time, that can also translate to your audience. And maybe it's not specifically because of a platform change, but it's an energy change. And then other people see that.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. The energy change is, we've all watched a YouTube video or a TikTok where you're like, this creator looks like they're being held at gunpoint to make this. Like they're miserable. Like no one's having fun watching it or making it, right? But you can tell when someone's having a good time or is passionate or excited.
Yes. Okay, so do you have a kind of tip or advice that you find yourself giving creatives, artists over and over again?
If you are following other designers, don't feel like you need to follow other designers. That like we can always get inspired by each other, and that's really important for creativity in general. Um, but don't feel like what someone else is doing is what you have to do. And likewise, this is something I see a lot in the textile arts world, right? There's this whole thing of like, well, they copied me. Like, but there's only so many things. There's blatant plagiarism. Yes. That's not cool. That's not okay. But when it's something as iterative as textiles or knitting or crocheting or just making something, multiple people can make a similar or the same thing. Now, if somebody downloads your pattern, re-uploads it, and says it's theirs, that's bad, right? Like we can agree on that. But and that's a whole nuanced conversation. But the feeling precious about your designs and also feeling pressured by following other design trends, I wouldn't worry about that. I when I'm talking to other designers, it's like I almost suggest like find other art forms to get excited about and inspired by, right? Like film, going to an antique mall and taking pictures of old plates. Like find your inspiration in other things if you're worried about being called a copycat or not having an original idea or something like that. None of us do. Like nothing is original. And that's like that should feel freeing, right? You're always going to be inspired by something, which is really cool to think about how you can build on something, take an inspiration and run with it and make it your own.
Yes, and I know for myself personally, like if I'm looking at what's happening in the industry, what other designers are doing, I find that a lot less inspiring and more like a box than for
Yes.
me, a lot of my what I love to like pay attention to on social media is like painting and different forms of artwork that way. Um, but even for like marketing content and stuff, I find it so much more inspirational to just see what other artists are doing in completely different realms and industries and it's just more inspiring to me that way than looking at what's actually happening in our industry. And I think we also limit ourselves a lot at what's possible if we're like, well, everyone else is doing this, or like that's just not something we do in our industry. Well,
Makes
you can be the first person to do it in the industry.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I that's a big thing too. Like I hear people asking, no matter the industry, like, "Oh, well, we're not really on that platform in our industry." I'm like, "Cool."
That's a open space for you. You have
Yeah,
an open door.
yeah, like awesome. Like or oh, people don't really do that. Like, okay. Okay. So
You're gonna be the new cool person because you're introducing it.
exactly, exactly.
Oh, is there anything else that you want to share about yourself, your work? I'll have your YouTube, your Patreon, your Discord, all linked down below, so everyone can check that out. Also, I'll let you actually answer the question. But stepping back a second, when you were talking about the legal stuff, it's really funny that you brought up a bunch of the copyright stuff because after this recording, I'm talking to Tiffany, who is a copyright and trademark lawyer. And so
Yes.
that episode is actually already going to be live before this
Oh,
episode.
perfect.
So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, go
Mhm.
listen to that episode if you haven't already. Um, Hi, this is Jessica from the future. Just a real quick revision to what we just said. Tiffany, yes, was a guest on the podcast. We did not actually talk about copyright and trademarking on the podcast episode, but we have a whole module lesson on it inside of Pattern Design Circle, the membership that we hosted with Tiffany. So we dove into all of the ins and outs of copyright and trademark. So if you're looking for more information on what, what is okay to use as inspiration and quote unquote copy in your own designs, what is actually uh, you're actually able to copyright, what materials are actually copyrighted, and then what to know what to actually copyright of your own work, what that process looks like, all of the documentation, all of that. That is all inside of the membership. So I will link in the description. It's actually linked at the bottom of all of the show notes, but there's a link to join Pattern Design Circle, the membership, and then you will receive all of the information on that in the recording that we have in the membership. So sorry it's not on the podcast. We actually were talking about contracts instead. Uh, More legal stuff. Check that podcast episode out as well. But there you go. All right, back to chatting with Carolyn. Yeah. Anyway, you can actually answer the question about
No, that's so great. Like, because that's so important too, right? Like to know, like, because people will say like you stole something, but like know what is actual theft and know what is being an artist.
Yes, I just saw there was one not that long ago on the designer forum on Ravelry where this designer's like really upset because somebody's like, "Hey, you stole my stuff" or whatever. And she's like, she definitely hadn't. And she's like, she even like compared the designs and she's like, it sucks. And she's like, they're totally different, like constructions and like it was like
Like, I don't know.
But it's just like the motif on it that somehow now this designer's all upset and thinks that she stole it. So,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can get in trouble from stealing Pyrex's gooseberry pattern because it was inspired by. I mean, now I'm gonna get sued, but
yeah, you
yeah,
just brought it on yourself here.
I just brought it on myself. It's a discontinued pattern. What are you gonna do? The question you asked. Anything else about me
That
that
you
you
want
want
to share here. Yes.
to share? Okay. Um, no, just like parting advice of like continue to have fun. If you're not having fun, it's not worth it to suffer. Keep making stuff, keep making interesting stuff, and just really, really enjoy the craft and the art that you're making because it's so, so, so valuable to be able to express yourself and having fun while you're doing it is super important.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all about your journey and all of the nuggets and inspiration you shared. It's been fun to have.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I will. Wow. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.